I was hoping our banter would get the bejesus out of us, but it's been a day of failures.
Well, I lost. I'm so drained by the day I've lost the ability to switch gears and see when my audience is no longer interested in what I'm saying.
I have been crying so much today that like I can feel the puffiness like under my eyes.
So, geez, I think your day's been rougher than mine.
Probably not. I'm just an emo piece of shit. I'm just a straight white man who believes men should share their feelings.
Strong men also cry.
All right, you ready?
Yes.
All right, here we go. Ready? I already said that.
You're listening to the Jaunty Mantis, a podcast with creative questions from curious gamers. Surprise!
Whoa. Is that what this is? Is this a podcast?
It's a podcast, and sometime it might be on YouTube too. I don't know.
Yeah,
perhaps
one day.
I've said too much. But we are here in season 4, and I'm Jesse, and with me as always is my co-host and best friend, Matty.
Hello.
And we are answering listener questions this season, and today we have a question from Jordan.
Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah, we do appreciate the write-in. Jordan wants to know, and this is, I think, a really great question, how do you deal with IP in a role-playing game?
Mm-hmm. Intellectual property.
Yes. So to expand on that, I think it's just generally that idea. A lot of times, especially these days, a successful nerd-adjacent property will inevitably have a role-playing game. And this is not this is not anything new.
I know, but it feels so weird, doesn't it? Like, we really are in the promised land, aren't we? Like,
we really are.
As nerds. Yeah. I mean, can we just take a moment to appreciate this as a couple of 40-something nerds who, like, grew up in a world where, like, Darkman was the best we were going to do as far as a superhero movie? You know what I mean? And yet, here we are.
Yeah.
It's a foregone conclusion that anything that comes out now will have a role-playing game attached to it.
The other day, I was literally looking at my bookshelf, not this one, but the auxiliary one in the bedroom. There's more, dear listeners, than this. And I was like, oh yeah, that's that role-playing game based on a 2-season Netflix show. What should I should really read that. It's Altered Carbon. So that's...
Oh, nice. Nice. I've been wanting to check that out.
Yeah,
Netflix really has a lot of shows I've been wanting to check out, but then they cancel them before I can get to them.
Well, you'll know it's a sticker if an RPG comes out. So if the Warrior Nun RPG comes out, we'll know that we've made it, and you can watch it.
So when it comes to,
kind of want to do a Last Kingdom RPG using Wolves of God.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah,
that would be perfect.
So anyway, if I did that. That gets to the root of Jordan's questions. There's all this IP out there, and that what comes along with IP is a canon universe.
Mm-hmm.
There are known characters. A classic example, and I think probably, the first IP RPG I can think of is Indiana Jones.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Huh. When did that come out?
I was a TSR one that came out like in the early 80s, and it didn't have character creation rules.
Okay.
You could play as Indiana Jones.
Short round.
Yeah, you could play as Sala. I think you could play as Short Round, and you could play as what's the woman's name from Temple of Doom?
I don't know.
Okay, and you could play the guy that gets killed. Indy's friend that gets killed in the very beginning.
Marcus Brody.
Movie. No, not Marcus Brody. He lives through.
Don't open your eyes, Miriam.
So, yes, that's who you can play. That's the opposite of the episode's theme, though, because I think the question is when you get into a pre-established world.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you have all these characters and all these stories that people may know. The more popular the property, the more common it is they're going to know stuff about it. A perfect example of this is Star Wars,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think it kind of gets at the question of how do you deal with the fact that Luke Skywalker is out there and Darth Vader
Mm-hmm.
is out there? Do you avoid them like the plague? Do you avoid anything associated with them? And if so, why are you playing in this IP? Or do you kind of loop them in? And that's sort of the question to talk about today.
Yeah. And I think Star Wars is a perfect example because, at least from my point of view, my first exposure to a role playing game using an established IP was the old West End Star Wars role playing game,
Oh yeah.
and that was in an era where I thought only role playing games was second edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and when somebody showed me that there were other role playing games out there, and one of them was for fucking Star Wars,
Oh,
just completely blew my fucking mind.
I remember sitting on the floor of the B. Dalton or the Walden books at the mall, just looking at the gaming books, just drooling over the Star Wars West End game, which I don't think I ever actually picked up.
Yeah.
And the BattleTech technical readouts and Torg, whatever the hell Torg is.
And the old Rifts TMNT game.
Oh, yeah. I'd get those at a comic book shop. I don't know if they were ever in the Walden books.
Right.
Hmm. Okay.
The other reason why sorry, I know I keep cutting off your desire to take us to the next stage, but the other reason why Star Wars is such a good example for me is because I've run in and played a pretty decent amount of D20 Star Wars, and I have also tried to do some conversion with the Star Wars IP into the Cypher system.
Oh, cool. I know we've talked about that briefly, but I was just reminded of it, and I really like, we'll have to talk about that. It's a bonus episode.
Yeah.
That kind of is a perfect segue, though, into the next segment, and that's like what's sort of, we could talk a little bit. What do you think? What is the appeal of using a pre-established world that having an intellectual property like, say, Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, or looking at my shelf, Transformers, or something like that?
I mean, I don't know if you, I don't think you talked about this on the mics, but you have the Crow role playing game. And
Yes.
like the first thing that happened when you showed that to me was, I want to play this because I love the original Crow movie as being someone whose formative years were in the 80s and the 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
The appeal of any intellectual property in a role playing game is like, holy shit, I get to be in that world. I get to do things in that world. I get to be a character in that world. Like using the Crow as an example, like you were showing me the pages of this book over Zoom, and there's different, in addition to the Crow, there's other animal talisman or fetishes or whatever they're called, like avatars for that world.
Yeah.
And it's like that just got that. I mean, that's exactly what I would have been looking for, is like, what could I play that's not the Crow, but is a different like animal spirit or whatever it is in that world, especially in an IP like the Crow, where it's like the concepts are really simple to follow. It's a fucked up metropolitan, setting where like crime and violence is out of control. Go.
It's
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
story of revenge,
Yeah.
also elements of love and loss.
Right, right. With Star Wars, it's more complicated because, especially now, with the veritable buffet of Star Wars we have in all sorts of different eras and all sorts of different options, whether you want to be a Jedi or a scoundrel, or a tech or whatever the case may be. But the appeal is you get in universe of this thing that has captured your imagination.
Yep. I think on the other hand, to flip that over maybe to some of the challenges, I have this feeling that one of the things that you sort of assume is a challenge, which is people may have this fan love and really want to interact with the iconic characters. I think that may not actually be true.
You don't think that exists?
I don't think it's the thing that drives someone to want to play in the setting. I think they like the stage dressing
Okay.
more. Like I just can you say going I know we keep going back to Star Wars, but if you're playing a Star Wars game and there's an encounter with Darth Vader, can
Hmm.
you imagine that being anything other than a letdown?
I can imagine it actually. Okay, so yes and no. I agree with you up until the point of a movie called Rogue One.
Okay.
The end of Rogue One has one of the most badass Darth Vader scenes. And Darth Vader is a character that just naturally creates badass scenes.
Yeah,
And
and I
the end,
remember when we talked about that scene, I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's right. Darth Vader's actually scary."
yeah, yeah. And that movie, although I'm not a huge fan of Rogue One, I do appreciate it. And that is one scene I appreciate because I feel like they mix some of the old with some of the new. You know, we can do more things with like a guy in a suit and a lightsaber and all sorts of fancy shit and force powers. Back in the original days of the original Star Wars movies, they were very limited by, the restraints of the costume and like sword play as opposed to martial arts and shit like that. And so that scene of like Darth Vader coming down basically what is an extended hallway of a shuttle or starship and just like murdering fucking rebel soldiers left and right to get to what he wants, right? I
Yeah,
think
it's a
in that
Nebulon B
context,
medical frigate, but
yes, thank you. Yeah, I think in that context, like you can add that into a role playing game and provide that sense of terror, you know, into your player characters. But should they ever go up against Darth Vader? Absolutely not. Never.
it's funny I said that because there is an encounter, and I don't think this will go to air in time to ruin it. But there is an encounter coming up in my Dragonlance game where they will be in the same room with Lord Soth. Do you know who Lord
Yeah, I
Soth
do.
is?
I do.
Yeah, they will be between an exit that Lord Soth wants to go through and Lord Soth. And I am really excited slash nervous because it could very much be like the hallway if they have the sense to run.
Yeah.
Or Power Lord Soth just uses power word kill on a fifth level character.
For those of you who don't know who Lord Soth is, he is a character that for grognards is so cool that you could get a tattoo of Lord Soth, but then immediately regret it after it's healed, and you're looking at it going, "Oh my god, I made a horrible mistake."
I was looking at pictures of Lord Soth for tattoo art today.
Perfect. Oh my god, do I get my wings?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect. Wow. All right. Um, shit. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail. And you should totally get that tattoo.
I need a shoulder piece.
No, but Lord Soth is an awesome villain, and he has a
Yes, he
very
was a knight.
iconic look.
He was a knight of Solamnia, these paragons of order and virtue. He was given a chance to avert this great cataclysm. He chose jealousy and pride and lust for this elven priestess he had like captured and married or something, overdoing his duty. And the gods dropped a mountain of fire, like basically in the cataclysm in the Dragonlance world, ending civilization for a while. Which, to be honest, I'm like, that's sort of more on the gods than on that one guy. Like, I'm not Greek. I don't have a Greek view of religion.
Right.
But anyway, and he's cursed and he's a death knight, and a really powerful monster. And he had a book where he goes to Ravenloft and like hangs out with Strahd and like kicks his ass and gets tired of him. I don't know. He's cool for grognards, but it is because these Dragonlance novels established an intellectual property. I'm playing in an IP game in D&D right now.
Yeah.
Luckily, my players don't know the canon, so
Oh, okay.
that helps.
I think that's a good point to make. So was the inspiration behind running this Dragonlance game the fact that you love Dragonlance?
Yeah. That was pretty much the entire. I was like, man, they've got this new thing for 5e. I'm curious to know how they update the setting. Let's go. And there's some things that are very different from the way it was back in the late 80s, early 90s. Like there's vampires in Kryn now. People were mad about that when the book came out. Don't know why, but yeah.
Of course they were.
Yeah, so that's
People,
basically
you
why I
could
did
very
it.
easily not have vampires in your version of Kryn. It's a game of fucking imagination. For fuck's sake, will you please let the people who make these games try new ideas? For fuck's sake, please. I'm begging you guys. Can we please have new things? It's a game of imagination. If you don't like the way orcs are now, don't have them that way in your game. It's fine.
Well, this is going to be my new bit, driving Matt mad with that.
Yeah. Oh man, it drives me crazy.
Yeah,
Another
it's
topic
really
for another episode.
Okay, so
Wait. Let me ask you this.
yes,
So this was part of your goal was to then introduce your players to the world of Dragonlance.
yeah,
You're like, you want to share the love.
yeah,
You love Dragonlance. It's a classic IP for D&D that new generations of gamers wouldn't necessarily know about, but it's like sacred to grognards. It was books. They should have made them into movies. That's one of my biggest criticisms of the D&D movie, Honor Amongst Thieves or whatever the fuck it was called. I thought it should have been the first book of the Dragonlance Chronicles should have been that movie instead. I'm not the only. That's not an original idea. Other people have said that too, but missed opportunity in my opinion. But you love this setting and you love this IP and you wanted to share that with them, right?
yes.
So what were some things that you made sure to do in order to share, to translate the love and appreciation of Dragonlance?
I went back and reread the original novel trilogy, Dragons of Autumn Twilight, Dragons of Winter Night, and Dragons of Spring Dawning, which is, now here's where I get grognardy. All the Dragons of Summer Flame stuff with the Chaos War and all that, I don't even count that. And I did read them all, but whatever, that's fine. I went back to the source material and I read it or listened to it on Audible while I was working. Mm-hmm. And then the adventure module, while updating the world significantly in some of the more problematic aspects that are like in the original novels because it was written when it was written, does a really great job of keeping on theme. And that's one of the things that I think at the time I first fell in love with Dragonlance, I loved the writing in these books. But when I would try and do a Dragonlance game, it just kind of fell flat because I didn't really get that the Dragonlance novels it's a romance story. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying it's a romance novel. I do think it's actually better written than that. Sorry if I'm coming off as a snob. Sorry to fans who love, romance novels. But I think it's got more of a romance. It's more interested in how the characters feel about what's happening than what they actually do, and about their friendships and the betrayal of that friendship. And it's very much about how these people going through this situation feel about each other and feel about what's happening. And I thought that was really cool because I was not reading a lot of fantasy in 1992 that was like that.
Right. It was very ahead of its time, especially when you look at what a lot of our modern entertainment is, especially in TV show format. That's really what it is, what it's all about. Is a lot of it's about the characters going through these events.
A diverse ensemble cast with powerful female characters.
Right. Yeah. It was really ahead of its time. And I think it's not celebrated enough for that, in my opinion. And when you say romantic, it's not romance as in I'm in love, necessarily you would use romance novel, but the characters are falling in love with each other. They do have, they are emotionally complex, and they do have affection for each other. And that is part of the appeal of reading through it, is learning how these characters are navigating their emotions for each other, because they travel with each other, they depend on each other, they live and die by each other. And I think that that is a mostly overlooked aspect of like the D&D party is like these people trust each other. You go into a dungeon with these people, you need them to trust you. You know what I mean?
This is, I don't know that their audience is going to get this, but have you seen me trying to lean into that with Seamus?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have. Seamus,
That's,
your character in my 1 to 20 game.
yes. That's one of the stakes is he likes these people he travels with, even when he's frustrated by them.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, definitely. Cool.
yeah. So that's the part of the canon that's interesting. And then, of course, like dragons flying around with people with lances on their back, like dueling in the sky, floating castles, death knights, all that cool, big fantasy war story stuff is also there as well.
I am really astounded by this idea that you ran this game because you love it and want to share it, and your players don't know anything about Dragonlance, because I would be tempted to then start putting those major lore characters into the mix to see how they reacted to them, because what are they going to do? Call me on it? Like,
that's Raceland. That's pretty clearly Raceland.
You know what I mean? They're like, oh, you are not playing that character correctly, or, Raceland would never do that, or whatever. You know what I mean?
Bring me my herbs. I need to drink the tea to recover my spell power.
So did you stay away from using major lore characters? And
they're not in Solus. They're not in, it's like at the beginning of the war.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
This is like what the North Wing of the Red Dragon Army is doing. So they're in Solamnia. It's not till after the events of this adventure that I think like Lorana and Sturm come to defend the High Clerist Tower, and then the Blue Dragon Lord is revealed to be who she is. And okay, anyway, I could go on, but I don't want to spoil a it's probably 30-year-old book series, probably a 40-year-old book series, a 40-year-old book series at this point. Yeah, so it's just the adventure takes place in the geographically different area, but with elements. And of course, it's tied in. Like there's a whole section for what if you have spellcasters, like there's little mini quests for the challenge of the like Order of Sorcery. Like the wizard gets little side quests throughout the adventure to like go to this place and take the next step on their path to becoming a wizard of high sorcery.
Mm-hmm.
It's thoughtful, it's cool, and it helps me convey the love, and it's working.
Nice.
They're getting it. I've stolen stuff from the novels. Like one of the players is a cleric of Reorx, the god of craft and creation who forged the Dragonlance. Mm-hmm. So I had them make a perception check one night at camp, and they looked up and realized that the constellations of Paladine, Takesis, who they call Takis, like the chips, mm-hmm. because no one respects their dungeon master, mm-hmm. And Reorx were all missing. Mm-hmm. And then they were trying to figure out what that means. Like, and then he was like, a divine magic works for me, because he's like one of the first clerics, and that's a cool story element.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know.
So the reason why I'm having you talk about this is because Jordan is a player in one of your groups. Is he a player in this group?
He's the cleric of Reorx.
Oh, he's the cleric. Okay.
Yeah.
So when Jordan wrote in about this question, he wasn't talking about this game, or was he?
I don't think it was this game. He was probably talking about either the Star Trek Adventures game that we were playing in together a while ago, or the Dune game that he sat out on, but that his wife was playing in and we were playing in. And he's also he's been picking up some RPG books. He's got the Fallout RPG, which is another established IP. Amongst others. So yeah, it's a decision. For character creation, have you ever had an issue balancing freedom versus canon?
Me personally, no.
Yeah, I haven't either. Had something like I'm Luke Skywalker's brother.
I personally, I have seen this happen where, and I guess the new generation embodies this more than we do, but back in the day you did have that person that was basically trying to make Drizzt, from the Forgotten Realms. You know what I mean? It's like he might as well named his character Draws It. You know what I mean? Or whatever, right?
Do you remember that old AD&D second edition character folio?
Mm-hmm.
The one with the green like background,
Yes.
and then your character sheet was in there. There's like 5 in my copy of that. 5 characters named Tanis Half Elven.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never had an issue with it, but I think that there's room to grow with it. If you like a particular character from a particular intellectual property, I don't think there's a problem with embodying that character concept as long as you do enough to make it your own. Now, my observation of the new gen nerds who are playing role-playing games is they take a more literal approach. You know, this character is blah, blah, blah from this anime, which I find to be fascinating. I have heard from, other people's groups that have involved the new generation that they like are playing more direct representations of these characters they love. Totally cool. Totally fine with it. Not exactly my thing, but I ain't here to judge. As long as you're using your imagination and rolling dice, like you're doing it right as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that's cool. The as a side note, the original adventure modules that they put out when the Dragonlance novel started doing well had the characters as your characters.
Yeah.
Like you were supposed to play as Caramon and Raceland and Sturm, and like,
yeah,
that's a trip to me.
That reminds me of when our season 3 review of the Transformers role-playing game. I think what I said in that episode is that is the one game where I would definitely want to play one of the Transformer characters in order to get that more authentic feel to the Transformers universe. Like, I don't want to play... I'd be really, really leery about being too goofy, even though I know it's a childhood cartoon to sell toys. I wouldn't want to play a character that turns into a toaster, which is what I would naturally be inclined to try to do.
I don't want to do the thing I'd naturally be inclined to do.
I want to take Transformers a bit more seriously than that and try to get more into the direct feel of what the intellectual property is. You know what I mean? In Star Wars, you're going to want to play a Jedi, right?
Guilty.
So it's like, I feel like to a certain extent, you should model after something you want to play, right? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think like if you're keeping the themes, I just think it's kind of weird. To me, it's just cringy. I mean, that's like the worst I can say about it. It's just cringy to try and tie your character to like the famous character in a setting. Adapting the IP to your game style. I think the first area that we could discuss there is, and I hate saying this, but game master control.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a call out reminder, because I want you to talk a little about this. You've talked when we've talked about doing a Star Wars game before about saying like, hey, these are the set historical events that will happen during the time this campaign happens. Could you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Star Wars is an excellent IP to run a role-playing game in and stay away from the events and characters that we all know and love, because it is a large galaxy with lots of opportunity, and it is totally I mean, I would even encourage it to regularly, like if you're playing during the Rebellion era, if I was running a game during the Rebellion era of Star Wars, right? Eventually you have to ask yourself, like, what role do my characters play in this? Like, I'm assuming they're playing the good guys. If they're playing the Empire, oh boy, let's work with that. I love this idea. But like, let's assume we're playing the good guys, right? Like, what is their role in the rebellion? You know what I mean? Are they in that, are they at the Battle of Yavin? Like, were they on Endor? You know what I mean? Like, where were they in the whole scheme of things? And Star Wars allows you to have these events happening either at a distance or right in their face, and you can still give them things to do that are happening at the same time as these important events.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think like I would, if I was running the One Ring, I think I'd try and set some limits and be like, hey, you guys will never be in the same room as the
Mm-hmm.
One Ring.
Yeah.
You will not be able to get the Ring of Power.
Right. Right.
That's off the table. That's going to do its thing. But like One Ring is really clever about the way that it does that and helping you out is it sets the time like in between Bilbo's adventure with the dragon and Frodo's taking the ring to Mordor. So it's like, I think 20 years after Bilbo gets back, and there's this growing shadow, but none of those pieces have really started, moving and flaring up. So you have this post-apocalyptic wasteland of Eriador, the northern kingdoms, and you have a huge scope of time that you can kind of set in, much like you did space.
Right.
And then like the published adventures, like the one I was telling you about, do a really good job of reminding you the weird stuff on the sidelines of Middle Earth is like fairy tales.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, weird riddles and bargains, like more of the Hobbit and less of like the Battle of Pelennor Field,
Right. Right. That is a very overlooked aspect of the Lord of the Rings setting, is that fairy tale fantasy aspect. Right.
Well, that's the next thing I think you have to do IP successfully is really be clear about what you want to do with tone and theme. I did that with the Dragonlance game. This is there will be combat. This is a war story, but it's also, it's a romance and,
Right.
And
yeah,
I've talked at length about like how they liked everybody in the starting village who was really nice to them. And then I got to burn the village down because it's a war story.
If this was Star Wars, I would say, okay, this game is going to take place during the Rebellion era. Your characters are going to have an opportunity to join the Rebel Alliance. You will never meet Han Solo. You will never set foot on the Millennium Falcon, right? I'll set those ground rules, those expectations up front. But then when we do get to the Battle of Endor, and Lando Calrissian in the Millennium Falcon needs to make a run at the new Death Star, maybe I have the player characters in other ships clear them a path so they can get through.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I think like kind of handling that adjacency, I think is a way to be respectful of the IP and to still give because the last thing you want to do is restrict your player characters so they don't feel like they can have any kind of meaningful impact on this world, on this setting, on these events. You want the whole reason why you're playing an IP role-playing game is to get further invested in the stories. So to avoid them completely, I think is a mistake.
I think a lot of IPs, and I think this, to me, maybe it leans more horror with this. The IP is just a bucket of tone of theme you can paint with. Mm-hmm. One of the ones that we had is super fun playing the starter box in my in-person game as a one-shot is the Walking Dead RPG, which is really, really well done. I highly recommend that if you're looking for a good horror game. Check out the Walking Dead RPG, particularly at starter box. Like in that game, I'm like, oh yeah, you could meet Rick and Carol and Michonne, but like there's like to be antagonists to you as they are. So you probably want to stay well away from Atlanta. But I mean, like you have the whole world of the zombie apocalypse, and then you could be like, I'm going to set it in Oklahoma City because that's where I live. Oh, I doxed myself again. Darn it. Oh, well. Yeah, like, and you're not going to meet the characters. Walking Dead is a cool story about those characters, but the world of a zombie apocalypse where the apocalypse never ends is the theme of that, and that's a cool theme. Another one that's great at doing theme, and you don't have to even worry about the canon too much. I'm prepping for this for Saturday. Is the Alien RPG.
Yeah.
Because, just as long as you're not a colonial marine from Aliens or like on that prison planet, I think we all get the gist. The IP is a shorthand, and then you can be like, you're all going to die.
Is there hold on a second. Is there any intellectual property where you would cross that line and get the player characters directly involved with the canon characters? Because I can think of one.
What do you think? Or is it what would be mine or yours?
I can think of one I've mentioned on this show before in one of our bonus episodes.
Oh, okay.
Star Trek Lower Decks. So Lower
Right.
Decks takes a more humor-based approach to kind of like taking the piss out of Star Trek while at the same time like grabbing it and holding it close and being like, I love you so much, you know?
Yes.
Like in only the way somebody loves something could do, right? And so if we were playing a Star Trek game and I was like, look, guys, this is going to be Lower Decks Star Trek, then you're totally meeting those characters. You're probably on that ship. You're probably lower deckers. You know what I mean? Like, that's the whole point. I want you to meet those characters and interact in that setting in that specific way. But if we were playing like a standard run-of-the-mill Star Trek game, Star Trek Adventures or whatever, then I would not want to do that. Like, you are not on the Enterprise. You don't know Worf. You know, you can't request to talk to Captain Picard. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not happening.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I think I would use big shot canon characters, or I will, because I'm going to do this in the Transformers game.
Nice.
But again, to me, one of the things that helps me get over, because I have this fear of treading on canon. I don't know
Really?
why. I don't know why. It's just ingrained. Because I basically I don't want to be writing fanfic. Is basically like,
yeah, that's a good call. Yeah.
like I don't like, hey, more power to the people who do it. They've developed great writing chops. People have been wild success at writing fanfic. For me,
Sure.
I'm just like, I
That's just
want
not
to
what you wanna do.
my own thing. But if I ran a Transformers game, or when I run a Transformers game, because there have been so many versions of this iconic character, there have been so many, it's not even a multiverse. It's just been rebooted so many times. I'm like, I got a broad shape of this character and I can feel like this is my version of this one. And I feel like I have permission to write fanfic in the Transformers universe.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And then I can make Optimus Prime and Megatron kiss.
As they were always meant to do.
Yes. Yes, yes. We got anything else on this? I'll check the outline.
No, I totally do.
Okay.
So let's assume that Jordan is not running a game. Let's say
Right.
he's making a character in a game. So what kind of tips do we have for him and dealing with IP? Like it can, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because although I've not had this necessarily with IP, I have had this with setting and rules. The Exalted games that we did, there was a level of intimidation for me as a brand new player to Exalted, making a character and having like you and a couple of the other people, I think at least one other person in that group, know a lot more about Exalted, like how it works, how all the different, types of characters are, how the powers work, what the whole theme of it is. And that version of Exalted was kind of a little intimidating to get into, just, coming off of Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition. So,
Well, there isn't really a meta plot in Dungeons and Dragons, and all of the White Wolf books of that era, Vampire, Werewolf, Wraith, Exalted, had a meta plot.
yeah,
And it was really, if you were a fan, it was really engaging to learn what that meta plot was and who was where and what they were doing and blah, 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 which makes me think that's great to count in this IP discussion. I never would have thought of that until you brought up that example.
yeah. So what kind of advice can we give to somebody who's playing a character in an IP, and let's just assume they don't know as much as the person who's running it? I mean, that can be kind of intimidating. You definitely don't want to do the wrong thing.
I think you start small, and you have you start in a small geographic area, or you don't tell the whole history of the world because most people don't know it. Sorry, we did that to you in Exalted. It's just so cool. You probably describe the theme and say, these are in D&D, like, hey, there's hill dwarves and there's mountain dwarves. They don't really like each other very much. There's some bad blood there. If you're interested in playing one of those, we can explore why.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if you're playing an elf, there's a couple unique civilization of elves that kind of have some problems with each other and some history. If you want to play that, we can talk about it and explore it. If you want to play a Kinder, what is wrong with you? Get out of my house. No, I've actually really had fun playing my Kinder NPCs because they're not kleptomaniacs anymore.
Thank God.
Yeah. Yes. No, it's just what my character would do. They are it's what my character would do character.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would start small and then say, do you know anything? Like, have you seen this movie or know anything about this? Like, oh yeah, I heard there's this group, there's this group called the Jedi. Like, what are they about? Like, oh, well, okay, you want to be a Jedi? We're doing Star Wars. It's an era where Jedi is possible. Yeah, you can be a Jedi. So basically you're try and bring peace and balance and goodness and justice.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. So start small. What are the elements of this you're interested in? The normal, typical session 0. Discuss the theme with your players so they know to make a character within that theme, and I think you're good to go. What am I missing?
I don't know if you're missing anything. I think that you should encourage your players to take big story swings.
Okay.
Because I think you should send the message using the Star Wars example. I know I just said, like, look, you'll never be meeting Han Solo. You won't set foot on the Millennium Falcon. But that doesn't mean that you won't have an impact in the great grand scheme of the Star Wars universe. And so if I was running a Star Wars game, I would say to you, here's the concept of this game, this campaign. It's going to be in the Rebellion era. You're going to be in the Rebel Alliance. Your character is important. They're not a higher up commander, but they're not just a rank and file soldier just trying to like help out whatever way they can. Your character is important, and our goal is to figure out how and why. Like, what are you thinking about playing, right? And maybe you're like, well, I really like Han Solo, and I know you said we're never going to meet him, but I want to play a scoundrel. Perfect. Okay, you're a scoundrel. Are you a smuggler like Han Solo, or are you a different kind of scoundrel? And let's just say they're like, well, I'm like a smuggler. It's like, okay, so maybe you're doing smuggling runs for the rebellion, and you've run some very important cargo in the past, and you've managed to pull off something that has gotten you a lot of clout in the Rebel Alliance. It's really caused people to take notice of who you are and what you're doing and what you're contributing. Think about that and get back to me with some ideas, and we'll talk about it. And I would do that with each one of the player characters. If a character was wanting to run a Jedi character in the Rebellion era, I'd be like, okay, well, as we know, there really is only one successful Jedi story, but that doesn't mean it's the only successful Jedi story. And that's kind of where the rest of Star Wars has really helped us out by saying, like, there are characters like Ezra Bridger that's out there. There are these other Force characters. So I would say, like, okay, so your character is not going to be a straight up Jedi. Your character is going to be Force sensitive, Jedi leaning. And part of your struggle in developing this character is how closely you want to try to follow a path that has now been broken and is no longer readily available to you.
And can get you killed.
And so, like, I would do that with every single person's character, and I would be specifically looking for player characters that seem kind of boring or safe or run-of-the-mill, and I would push those players to say, like, hey, let's think a little bit bigger. Let's try something. Like, let's figure this particular thing out. Because I think intellectual property can be very intimidating. You don't want to look the fool in front of the GM who knows everything about Doctor Who. You know what I mean? You're just like, I fucking, I just don't want to, I don't want to mess this up. It's like, don't worry about it. You can't mess it up.
Now I want to read the Doctor Who
role-playing game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's really the crux of the problem. That's how you deal with IP is like you 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 decide what level of influence the IP has over the game. Is it going to be a lower decks kind of situation where you embrace it and you start getting everybody drinking it up? Or are you going to keep it at a distance? Or are you going to let your player characters have freedom? Because that's really what you're there to do. You know, even you who are running a Dragonlance game, you're trying to share what Dragonlance is to your player characters. But I know you well enough to know that if one of your player characters came up with something that was really cool in your game that violated Dragonlance lore, you would let it slide. Not just because they don't know the difference, but because you know it's worth having at the table.
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately how you deal with IP. So maybe that involves another conversation with your group where you're, maybe that involves another conversation with your group where you're like, look, here's the ground rules, here's the expectations, but I want to see big things happen from you guys.
Cool.
What do you think?
No, I like it. I think that's a really great way to handle it. And you're right. I would totally, if someone was just like, I want to play this thing that's not on Dragonlance at all, I'd be like, well, okay, we can work it in. There's enough spots on the map. That just reminded me, this is another little aside though, like my character in the One Ring game is like a 6,000-year-old high elf, like who has been everywhere and seen everything. So like I constantly refer to events from the canon just because I have the player knowledge and I can't change them. They're events that happened in the past. So,
right.
But it's just to be connected to that universe.
But even if you did want to change them, that's your character's perception of the situation.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that what you said is the truth. It just means that's what your character believes is the truth.
Can we do, this is a big ask, but as we're coming here towards the end of today's episode, can we do a lightning round of IP campaign pitches?
Yes, but I would like to add one more thing.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Before we do that, because this is something that I don't think is considered enough when it comes to IP. Jordan, ask yourself this, whether you're in a group and you're playing or whether you're running this game, consider this. What if you run the IP and let the players just run roughshod over the intellectual property? The concept of the multiverse is more popular now than it's ever been. People understand alternate realities. Marvel is like tripping over themselves trying to make this work on the big screen over and over and over again, with the latest Deadpool and Wolverine showing that it can, I guess, work, at least financially. So like, what if you were running a Star Wars game and you said, hey, this is an alternate reality Star Wars setting. You will meet Han Solo. You can kill Darth Vader. You can change the events of this story dramatically. It's just up to you on how exactly you're going to make that happen. So consider that as an option too. That might be the easiest way to deal with IP, is as long as everybody's okay with it, you're just like, yeah, we're going to mess with this. This is an alternate reality. This is the multiverse when it comes to this intellectual property.
Get in the YT-1300 cargo transporter. We're killing Vader.
Yes. Tell me that doesn't have some sort of appeal to you. Like tell me
the
that
Inglorious Bastards of Star Wars?
Yes.
Of course it has appeal.
Yes. That's the perfect way to put it. Yes. Now I want to fucking run that game. I want to be like, this is the Inglorious Bastards of Star Wars. Yes. That's perfect. Yes. All right. Thank you for letting me throw that in there at the end.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Lightning round pitches for IP.
Yes.
Okay. Why don't you go first then?
The year is 2036. The war for Cybertron has ended in a victory for the Autobots. The Decepticon remnants have readjusted to Cybertronian society. Those too violent or too deranged stay in concentration camps for re-education. The PCs are those Decepticons, still loyal to the cause that no longer cares for them. Megatron's totally capitulated and rejoined his friend Optimus. You find rumors from this old dying prisoner of the location of the Enigma of Combination, the thing that makes combiners possible, and you break out and go on a galaxy-spanning quest to find it.
Holy shit.
Interrogating as you travel whether your actions in the war were worth it, and what are you going to do with it when you get it.
Holy shit. How am I supposed to follow that?
I don't know. We just Inglorious Bastard Star Wars, and that was, I thought, equally good.
All right. Okay. I guess I'm not gonna do a fun voice, unfortunately. But my pitch would be, and this is getting super deep on Matty here, so probably only 10 of you will understand. Farscape. John Crichton's children have had children. So it is several generations separated from John Crichton. He has solved and shut down the wormhole weapons experiments, thought for good. And now every one of the player characters has some form of John Crichton's DNA in them and are now being gathered up in order to start a new wormhole weapons project, because whoever's doing this thinks that whatever's quality he had can also be found in his lineage. And the player characters don't know that they are his descendants. The basis of it is you would set the table with a set group of character options and then reveal it that they are all descendants of, I guess, John Crichton and Aaron Sohn. And that they are being gathered up for this explicit reason.
That is a deep cut.
I told you it would be.
I think, this one I think I got it from Mark, friend of the show, the guy who really does sci-fi games. But I just, as we've joked about being Corpo Jesse and Corpo Matty, and then seeing the bleak drudgery of the corporate sector in Andor, you are a rebel propaganda and recruiting cell in the corporate sector. And yeah,
right.
That's the pitch. That's it.
Yeah.
You have to work an office job trying to get your friends that you work with mad about the Empire.
I love it. Ghostbusters.
Oh shit. Okay.
Alternate reality. You've been left the firehouse, the car, the proton packs, everything in some sort of mysterious auction that you've been the beneficiary of. And the player characters have to figure out what these things are, how to use them, and how to not only like bust ghosts, but also keep the business going. Like they have to make like economic decisions. They have to run a business in the role-playing game.
There has to have been a Ghostbusters
from going out of business.
There has to have been a Ghostbusters RPG, right?
How can there not be?
I mean, okay, I don't know if we talked about this. I'm just going to bring it up. I got April Fools by another podcast the other day that we're talking about reviewing an RPG that doesn't exist. That we're back to Jason Alexander, Duckman, the role-playing game. I would play that as a nice pitch. I don't know. I'm looking at my Everyday Heroes books, which are nothing but IP. So far, I have The Crow, Total Recall, and Pacific Rim. I want to do Pacific Rim just out of curiosity about how that works with the mecha and the kaiju.
Star Trek, 32nd century, right before Discovery shows up.
Okay, so it's the burn.
It's the burn. Maybe the burn just happened. So the Federation is destroyed or falling apart, and you get all the toys and tricks of the 32nd century without the confines of the Federation and Star Trek. Like that's all crumbling in the background.
Okay.
Because I think there's a lot of like really cool ideas and some cool tech in that series. It kind of gets overshadowed by, you know, the Star Trek of the whole situation. Like, you know, the non-Federation aspect of Star Trek I think is very compelling, and we rarely ever get to see that. You know?
Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, I'm out of ideas.
Oh, okay.
So this has been Matty and Jesse being very tired.
That's true. We both apparently had a hell of a day today, but we still decided to record. And listener, thank you so much for joining us. Jesse, if they had any questions or comments about today's episode or any other episode of the Johnny Mantis, how can they reach out to us?
Yeah, send us an email at jauntymantis@gmail.com. That is JAUNTYMANTIS. Altogether, jauntymantis@gmail.com.
That's awesome. And until next time, dear listener, get out there and play some fucking role-playing games or some shit.
Yeah, like be like Princess Leia's like butler or something.
That's right.
I don't know.
Start a Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure role-playing game where you get to borrow the booth for a little bit.
I'm like 98% sure there's a Bill and Ted's RPG.
You know, if I had to be honest, I would do Bogus Journey. Bogus Journey is the best movie out of the three.
It is the most station.
It is the most station, for sure.